Thank you, Emma. I should also point out, as I teeter into my late 20s next week, that I'll be holding on to that young person position for as long as possible. So I think you've actually made my first slide there pretty obsolete, but just to recap, yeah, I am, although it's a volunteer project, I'm sort of the de facto technical lead for Open Data Scotland. But that's my volunteer job. My day job at the moment is I work for the NHS as a software developer, and I've been working in the public sector software development space for about 4 years now. And I've also recently become a trustee of Code the City off the back of working with them at events. So yeah, just to recap again on what Open Data Scotland's about, it's an open source, collaborative and volunteer run project, and we want to help people locate and understand open data better in Scotland. So the project sort of came out from a hackathon that we did a while back at a Code the City hackathon event. It's been in operation for nearly 2 years now. The website's been up since November 2021, which we'll get to in a wee bit. But from the technical side of things, which I know you're all here for, it's about taking the data from different sources and cleaning it, processing the metadata and collating it into one easily findable space together. And we do this basically so the public can better understand what open data is out there in Scotland. So to start off with, we started at a hackathon back in May, June time 2021. And we formed a sort of small team called the Oddbods. And the question that came about at the time was, how easy is it to find open data in Scotland? And the answer, not very easy. So we decided to go for, have a look at the local authorities that are out there in Scotland and see how many of them were publishing open data on open data portals. And at the time we started, there was maybe about 10 out of the 32 that were publishing. So we decided to have a stab at that and see how easy it was to gather the data. So we set up a Google Sheet, and we collated all the data. Some of it was manually gathered where people were painstakingly adding rows into a spreadsheet. I know, horrific. And there were also some sort of starters at Python scripts there as well for people to scrape data in there. But it was all sort of very unorganized. And in the end, so that was about 5 skilled individuals over 30 sort of work person hours over a weekend. And we ended up with 427 data sets that we gathered. And we took that data and we did a bit of playing about with it in Jupyter Notebooks to get some stats from it, and we put it in sort of a big static HTML page, but we weren't really happy with how it ended up. It was a great first proof of concept, but we wanted to take it further. So at the next hackathon, we basically ran with that and started creating some more scripts. At the time, it was 95% Python, 5% C# because I was really awkward and liked coding in C#, but soon I was converted over to the Python way of working things. So our backend stack now for Scraper scripts is 100% Python. So we've got 10 Scraper scripts that run of different types of APIs that are out there, which is really easy if you've got an API to use. Because if we've got open data portals that come along that are of the same type, we can just plug in a URL and generally, that's the data sets that get added to the listing. On the downside, there's some organizations out there that have static web pages that mean we have to go away and use libraries like Beautiful Soup in Python and actually scrape the data, which then can cause problems if the web pages change layout, like Karen spoke about in her talk. So I think there's it's maybe about a 50-50 split or 60-40 split at the moment as to API-based scripts. And then that basically gets munged all together into some CSVs and then some YAML files for our front end. So the front end that we've got is a site called JCAN, which is a play on CCAN, if you've heard of it, an open data portal. So it's Jekyll-based CCAN. So it's quite a sort of static site, basic site generated site that uses Markdown files for data storage. So we take the CSVs that we compiled and we convert them into Markdown files and upload them to the website. And the advantage of that is that it's hosted on GitHub Pages, so it's free. It's also great because we're contributing to open source. Our site is out there and it's available to everybody. And we also, the fact that we use JCAN is great because it's an open source project in the first place. So we're taking advantage of open source, but we're also giving back to it as well by contributing to that project. So we soft launched the website opendata.scot in November 2021. Off the back of soft launching the website, we came up with a 4-quarter plan and ran with it to establish the front end, fix any data source issues we had, did some automation, which I'll touch on in a second, and we expanded on the data sources that we had on there. So that's just a couple of stats there as to where we are at the moment. But I think the last time I checked the analytics for last month, we were hitting about 800 visitors a month or something like that. So for what I expected to be just a small project that a couple of people will look at, it seems to be growing quite rapidly now. I'll also point out that this kind of is the only part of it that we pay for, but we maybe don't really need to. We pay for our analytics through plausible.io, which is another open source project, but we pay for them to host our analytics. And we also pay for the opendata.scot domain name, and that comes out at about £150 a year. But really, you could run that. You could run that off a GitHub.io domain, and you don't need the analytics, and you could run this for free. So it's really easy, I think, for organizations to get out there and get started with publishing data. You don't need to have a full-blown data portal. So after we had these sort of scripts that we put together, it was still a bit of a pain because someone would have to manually run the pipeline on their computer and do the publish, and some of us use Mac, some of us use Windows. There were environment conflicts and all sorts of things. So at the time when I was working, I had been looking at GitHub Actions for CI and CD pipelines, but you can actually also use GitHub Actions just for running regular scripts and stuff. So our pipeline now runs on a weekly basis, on a scheduled basis through GitHub Actions. And if you have an open source repository, you basically get free usage to a point. You can't go on there and just mine Bitcoin and all that. You can go on there and use it for free usage for some reasonable things like scraping open data. So we have that and it runs every Friday at lunchtime now. It'll run automatically, provided it doesn't break, and it'll give us some information as to any errors that come up, or it'll also report it'll report to our Slack group when it actually does the commit. So that takes us to where we are today, basically, where we're now up to 1,600 plus data sets that automatically scraped each week. We'll take out the ones that basically have fallen off the face of the internet. We'll add the new ones. We'll also note the ones that have been modified as well. And we want to take that data now and use the GitHub API to sort of infer what's changing and put a change log in, basically, because at the moment it's kind of hidden away in a Git diff, and we want people to be able to read it more easily. So just to summarize what's next, basically, we want to do a bit more automation. We want to post to Slack, post to our Twitter account, and let people know what data sets are getting changed. Like I said, the pipeline breaks, someone has to go in and fix it. So we need some testers to come on board and sort of start testing our code and tearing it apart. We've got 13 open issues at the moment just to go and add new data sets onto our site. So, if anybody's wanting to come and get involved, I would recommend it. And there's other work that's out there as well. We've got 75 plus issues. There's something out there for everyone. And you can even go back and contribute to the original JCAN projects as well. So I don't think I've got time for this, but there's a wee summary slide here just to go through the sort of different technologies. The slide pack is up on the State of the OpenCon website, so I'd recommend checking that out afterwards. But yeah, some of the things I've mentioned are you've got GitHub and MK Docs that we sort of use for our project management side of things. We use Slack and Twitter for our engagement with the community. Like I said, the back-end data processing is all done in Python for just now, and our data storage is done in a mixture of CSV, JSON, and YAML. We've got GitHub Actions for our automation, GitHub Pages for hosting. There's a lot of GitHub in there. Like I said, through GitHub Pages, we use Jekyll for the static pages. Web Analytics is Plausible, which is an open source project. We use some other open source things like Chart.js and Leaflet.js. And we've got a couple of packages down there at the bottom as well. So that's just a quick whistle-stop tour. If you're interested in getting involved, I would definitely recommend checking out our website, opendata.scot, and that's our social information there. Thank you.